Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's session. Really excited to have everyone here. My name is Chris Hein. I am the Customer Engineering Director for our Google Public sector. So I run basically a team of engineers that helps educators, state and local governments, and higher educational institutions use different Google products. Been with Google for about 10 years, and I'm thrilled to be hosting this amazing panel of folks. And really what we're going to be talking about today is kind of a couple of conversations all put into one big category, and that is going to be data in the K-12 arena, and how does that then influence and how does it be used well? And how do we use it to benefit our learners? How do we use it to benefit our educators? And then a little bit of that blend also of how does that then change as we look at everybody keeps talking about AI, and how is that going to impact our school systems and the applications that are provided to them to be able to do their work. So thrilled to have with me today, as I mentioned, a panel, and so I'm going to let every one of you to go down. I'd love for you to introduce yourself, where you're coming to us from, and kind of what your space in this is, and then maybe a quick anecdote about the most embarrassing thing that happened to you in your K through 12 school experience. So I didn't tell you in advance that was coming, but I will share mine just to make it as awkward as it possibly can be to start things off. In that let's see, I actually should have prompted myself on this ahead of time. I scored a single goal in my high school soccer career, and it was on my own team, and we lost 1-0. So that was the pinnacle of my athletic success. So.
Great. Hi, I'm Lynzi, Ziegenhagen. I am here, I think, with 3 different experiences that are relevant. One, I led data and technology at a school system called Aspire Public Schools that at the time had about 35 schools in California. And then the second one, I started Schoolzilla, which was is a data analytics platform, and led that for 7 years. And then we got acquired by Renaissance, the guy at the end. And then I worked for Todd for a couple years. And then third, I'm an advisor for a newer startup called Dooii, D-O-O-W-I-I, that's like using AI in data integration and analytics. Excited to be here. Now it feels kind of embarrassing, but in 7th grade, I got punched by someone because they thought I had done something I hadn't done. And I was like just very confused about the whole experience, but that was the most notable thing that came up.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Chris Cirillo. I'm Group Vice President of Product Management at PowerSchool. I have been in ed tech my entire career. Basically started in a startup and went through the acquisition train, ended up at PowerSchool, and it's been a great journey. I focus on the classroom products, and I've always been focused on classroom products. So learning management, assessment, data and analytics, and really thrilled to be here. I'd say my most embarrassing moment was I'm a little bit of the class clown when I was younger, and a teacher gave me the nickname Toad for some reason, and she never really told me why, but it stuck, and other people started calling me Toad, and I wasn't really a big fan of that as a nickname, so that's probably my most embarrassing thing.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Carroll. I was once an 8th grade science teacher, turned into a tech director, and then I co-founded a company called Clever that does K-12 data integration and single sign-on. I'm now an advisor, and for me, I think my most embarrassing moment looking back on it, this was actually a really interesting moment to process embarrassing experiences in real time. In 4th grade, I was really good at math, and my classmates took to rubbing my head for good luck before every math test, which didn't feel that weird at the time, but now looking back on it, it was a very weird.
And here I didn't know we should have done that before starting the panel for good luck.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Barton Dassinger. I'm the principal of the Chavez Elementary School in Chicago, pre-K to 8, public neighborhood elementary school. I've been a principal now for 17 years. at Chavez is the second school I've ever been principal, and I've done some work with the district on looking at data across ed tech platforms. Great to be here. Hard to think of just a single embarrassing moment. I think I was maybe a sophomore or a junior when I had really big, crazy hair, and I caught my hair on fire in a chem lab.
Wow.
Yeah.
You guys would have made a good match here. Hi, I'm Todd Brekhus. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Renaissance. I'm also General Manager of Nearpod. I'm a former educator and been in the ed tech space my whole career as well and my whole life. And actually, that kind of brings up my most embarrassing, it wasn't really embarrassing, it was a notable moment. Our school system in the school that I grew up in, I was a junior, summer of my junior year, and the assistant principal called me up, or assistant superintendent called me up and said, "You're one of the kids with the computer in the neighborhood." I said, "Yeah, I had a computer at a young age." And we don't have anybody to teach a summer school program, and we're really to help the summer school program. We need somebody, there's gonna be a librarian or somebody there. And then the most notable moment was I was 15 or 16 years old and being the only one in the room with 24 7th graders opening computer boxes and putting computers together. So it was a super interesting experience. So.
Fantastic. Thank you all for being vulnerable and sharing. So I want to start with just the kind of the broad-based question of, what challenges have you seen? What has your company seen? And Barton, what has your school system seen in terms of when you think about the universe of data and how it could or should be used when it comes to education? What are some of the biggest challenges that you've seen, and what are some of the most interesting kind of moments that those have been overcome to benefit for our school systems? So we'll do reverse snake. So Todd, do you mind starting us off?
Not at all. I think the challenging aspect of bringing data together for a company like Renaissance was two-product company for decades, Accelerated Reader and STAR. So you had the STAR assessment, you had the Accelerated Reader product. And then in 2018, when I sold the company, Mion, which I founded, to Renaissance, all of a sudden we have two products with data sources. We have information that's, student IDs that you have to actually start to think about. Luckily, we started Clever and Mion the same year, or year after. But we've done 15 product integrations and acquisitions. And I won't go through them all here, but notably 3 different assessment systems like Illuminate, School City, DNA, FastBridge, STAR. And how do you really blend a product strategy together that has multiple data sets from multiple type of purposes? And it's also the most exciting thing that we've been doing, and thanks to Lynzi, and helped us get to Snowflake and move all of this data into a proper database that could really understand how to bring data together. We're finally able to launch this summer a product that is focused on bringing those interoperabilities together and bringing the experiences of, for example, our STAR and Mion and Freckle and Nearpod products into one ecosystem and one use case that a teacher can use to say, I've done this assessment, now how do I impact the recommendation of what that student should see based on the skills in that class? So we're both really spend a lot of money on this problem and a lot of pain and a lot of time, but the reward is definitely we're starting to see the opportunity for the reward, and the reward mostly for the teachers in the room.
I've seen this both at the school level, at my own school, as well as mentoring other principals, as well as at a district level. And I think the challenge is a lot of times those in charge of looking at data are not starting off with a clear research question to know what it is they want to answer. And we're so data rich and looking at everything that it all stands out, and you're trying to fix multiple things at once instead of focusing on one clear thing that, understanding what's going to have the greatest impact and what might be most easy to implement to get some desired results. And you're just looking kind of everything at once, and it becomes overwhelming. So helping school leaders start with the time-consuming task of determining a research question in advance of looking at the data is a very big challenge.
Yeah, I feel like I'm needing to hold myself back on this question because there's a lot of challenges, right? I remember being a first-year and second-year teacher and, knowing that I should be looking at data and saying, I could be looking at data, but I also have a stack of papers to be graded and on the passenger seat of my car that's getting taller and taller. And so I think creating just space for people to reflect and that culture is one of the biggest challenges still. I remember when I visited Lynzi at Aspire when I was a tech director and trying to learn how to make everything work. She printed out this like PowerPoint that I kept and like carried with me for like years around how they built a data culture at Aspire. And it was amazing. It was like, first we need cleanliness and we need practices and we need cycles to make that work. And then we need to build culture and we need to make things easy at first and scaffold and build things. It's not an easy thing. Even at Clever, where we have far more resources than most schools, building a data culture and building tooling has been very, very hard. So it's a challenging thing that requires, it has to be, a lot of pieces have to be built up over time.
I think PowerSchool's story is very similar to Renaissance. We really grew out of trying to break down data silos so that we had more interconnected data. We have products that range from central office to classroom to home. And so what our biggest challenge was is how do you make that data interoperable? How do you bring it at the right time to the right users? So one of the successes that I think that we've had is we launched a connected intelligence solution, which really aimed at replicating all of that source data, making it interoperable with other systems, but then giving it back to the district so that they can also leverage it. And working with one of our school district's charter public schools, they actually have used that connected intelligence system to start doing their own machine learning modeling, doing their own identification of their assessment efficacy. And I was just working with them, really proud to see a school district taking that much onus over their data and really trying to leverage it for the right reasons.
Great. One thing in the early days of Schoolzilla, we had this saying that was you had to see the data, you had to believe the data, understand what it means, and then act. And kids don't benefit unless you get through that whole cycle. And there's so many barriers to each of those steps. And I think some of you talked about that, seeing the data, you have to get all the data together that's relevant and show it in a way. And then you have to, if you have questions about it, actually be able to ask well, does that include the school that just opened this year? Or are those the kids this? You have to actually support that process. And then so what? Okay, we have this problem. Do we even know how to solve the problem that now this data has told me we have? And then act, actually take action. And so I think it's just hard to support all the parts of that process. So I think data ends up not achieving the benefit that it could have for kids and educators.
Yeah, I think reiterating a couple of points that I heard there, because they really resonate with me in the conversations that I've had. So one is, Barton, you mentioned you've got to start, in my opinion, you have to start with a problem statement, right? What are you trying to achieve with that data? Because oftentimes I've gone through many, many renditions of we're gonna build a better data warehouse. And it's great. And how will you know when you're done? And what will you have achieved when you're finished? And so starting with that idea of okay, what is the thing that we're trying to achieve and how will we use data to support it? And then Dan, you mentioned, I think of this idea of a data culture, right? And making sure you start to instill that data culture, both in terms of your K-12 districts as well as inside your organizations. At Google, we have this constant push-pull of trying to make sure that we're being responsible with the data sets that we have access to, but also do fun, interesting projects with it, right? So I'd love to turn now to, we talked a little bit about challenges, but let's flip it into what happens when you do have some of those projects, and Lynzi, to your point, you take them all the way to action. What are some amazing outcomes that you all have seen, and maybe breaking it into two categories of outcomes for the learners and then outcomes for the educators. So let's start with the learners. What are some great outcomes you've seen, data used for learners? So this one's popcorn. Feel free to jump in. Whoever gets the mic to their face first gets to go.
I guess I'll take a stab at it. So I think that teachers have always had a wealth of data. That's not been the problem, right? The problem has been having the time and energy to comb through all those reports and actually come up with an insight. And so to the theme of this conference and this particular panel, right, how does AI change that? I think this is a good opportunity where if we're building these responsible, centralized data systems, in a secure, reliable manner, we can now start to use some of the new tools, right? Even like something like anomaly detection to bring data insights or bring data to the teachers at the right time so that they're not just fishing for it, right? So a simple example of that, even on our chat assistant, we have this feature called Talk to Your Data. The idea is you can just ask a question, no matter where you are in our ecosystem, and get the answer, right? And it's not just simple questions, even some of the more complex ones, right? And the purpose there is the teacher knows what they want to know, and they don't have to go to a report, right? Just let me understand, what students didn't pass the last assessment and, why was that, right? So you can start to get to a point where you can give some insights like that. And I think making data more actionable and bringing it to them so they're not wasting their time going through reports is one of the big benefits that I think we're already starting to see.
One of the things that gets me most excited about data is when you can actually not just create a new task or a new opportunity to learn. I mean, those are fantastic, but when you can actually take something off of people's plates. One example of that happened with Clever during COVID, schools went to remote learning, and one challenge that teachers faced was taking attendance. It was an easy process. They knew how to do it in a classroom, but what does that look like when you have students doing a lot of independent learning every day? But it's still a requirement. They had to, report those figures. And so we built a little report for teachers that just showed for each of their students, had they logged into Clever that day and what applications had they used. It was a really easy thing for us to do, but all of a sudden, instead of the teachers having to go and send chats or post in Schoology to every student, it was just that process got taken care of. They had the data and they could just solve their attendance problem. And so sometimes, obviously, it's very important for humans to be in the loop on important things and for data to inform humans, but when data can just go directly to solving the problem directly, that's one of the things I'm most excited about.
One of the first features we built into Mayan was the student's profile of their literacy growth, and that was a really effective report that we didn't realize would take off as much. But when the student could see their own results of the power of their reading, and then when we connected it with STAR, it became a pretty powerful thing. I didn't realize that STAR didn't really show students their scores as much, and I was kind of surprised by that because, here I'm at a big assessment company, and we don't pay a lot of attention to the students actually seeing the scores. So when Mayan came on board in 2018, all of a sudden STAR scores were very visible to the student because they could see their reading progress and see that trajectory of growth that we were predicting and able to show that to the students. So I'm kind of obsessing right now in a design workshop mode about what and how might student self-efficacy and student self-growth start to help really our educational process and thinking about the teacher and the learner together. And I think it's a fun, exciting space. And I think AI is going to help that a bit, but I think most importantly, it's if we can think about the student as the actual real important person in this data journey, because I think in education, we've been thinking a lot about data for the educator, the administrator, and the teacher. And don't get me wrong, those are all significantly important, and significant growth needs to happen there. Now, I think you're probably going to ask about teachers, and I'll comment on that. But what about kids? And how do kids start to see their own growth and their own opportunity for getting better?
I'll just tell a quick story on that. I've got a son who's in 5th grade, and he's a bright kid, terrible test taker. And it wasn't until we sat in 5th grade, he finally got like a specific report that showed like, okay, you're in the green, but if you're in the blue, you get to be in advanced classes next year. And it was just this literal color difference that once he saw that, and it was like, that was it. And then he took that same test a few months later, and he understood, and he took his time, and he really concentrated, and he jumped, like huge jump in scores. So to your point, Todd, like sometimes just making sure that data is clear and visible to the learner can really transform how they're going to experience the assessments and the tests that they're being forced to take.
And I'll add on to that, even as administrator, whoever your audience is, just making sure they have data that's understandable for them so they can use it. So I've done this a lot with administrators in the Chicago Public Schools with developing reports so that they can monitor and understand their teaching grading practices better, because it's not something that has been built into our system. And those administrators who are using it have been able to increase the on-track numbers for the students pretty dramatically because that data is presented in a format that I developed and was usable at my school, and now others are able to do it as well.
Any other thoughts on ways that it's transforming on the learner side, the students?
I think the key point is how do triangulate and combine a lot of this data together? Because I think this idea of logging into one product and getting data and another product and getting data, and how do learners start to see this opportunity together, I think is a really opportune time. And I think as an industry, we all need to get better at this. And I know that it's been helpful to have products like Clever and ClassLink and GG4L and other companies that are working in this interoperability space on the identity of the student, but we're gonna need to really think about how the assessment data, the instructional data, the exhaust data from all these applications start to become visible to kids and let us propel a model both for teachers and kids in this area, in my opinion.
Fantastic. Let's flip it. Let's talk about teachers. Are there any other examples that you all have seen in terms of data empowering teachers to see better outcomes or to achieve anything more than they've done previously?
If we go back to that, see, believe, understand, act, I think with Schoolzilla, there were so many times where while there are lots of problems that people don't know how to solve, there are plenty of problems that teachers and principals know how to solve if they just know they have them. And so, whether it was like a school that had an attendance problem in high school, but they were able to see like, oh, it's the 9th grade girls that aren't coming to school, and it's been happening for the last month, then they went to go talk to the 9th grade girls and be like, what's going on? Like, and uncovered like they needed more social emotional support, and like the answer to the attendance problem was not what they thought it was going in. So I think that's just an example of helping people see, like, fix the things they know how to fix, because there's plenty of other hard stuff.
Yeah, that idea that you can't solve a problem until you can see a problem. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that really resonates, because one of the things that we've been focusing on is this notion of risk analysis, or like predictive early warning. The same thing, right? Which is, if I can help kind of create a light group of students who maybe have similar problems and bring that to your attention, you're more likely to take the right action, right? So enrolling them in an intervention, what is the right intervention? What are the intervention strategies that have proven to work with these types of students? I think those are the elements that can really make a difference.
We've seen that. One example is we were noticing at our school an increase in the failed assignment rates of students, something we don't look at too frequently, or it's not a auto-generated report. We had to work on this, and we saw as kids progressed through middle school, the number of failed assignments was increasing, and it was even more dramatic for male students and female students. And so we backtracked to 5th grade before they're in the middle school and figured out which ones were going along this path, and then looked at our paraprofessional schedules and rearranged their schedules and empowered them with this information so that they had a chance to help kids get started when our extra time to check in with them during their classes. And we pretty much over the last 3 years have flatlined that. So they're no longer increasing. There's no difference between the male and female students, but it's giving someone who normally is not even empowered with that data, that little bit of data, and letting them be the ones who could intervene has made a dramatic difference.
Yeah, I'm going to probably repeat my point, and in some respects, the ease of use aspect in ed tech is not necessarily something we all can claim we've been great at, right? So I don't know if there's agreement in the audience on that point, but multiple products, multiple apps doing multiple things, and a very complex ecosystem of products that exist across the board. So obviously, it starts with sign-on and ease of use and getting there, and I think we're getting much, much better at that. As I said, the recommendation and the what's next conversation, the ACT point, is absolutely where our industry and our space needs to go. And that's obviously about this, however you titled it, or the GSV team titled it, interoperability to get to AI as well, because we have to think about what multiple points of information that the teacher is dealing with and consider their time being incredibly golden and so needed. So how do we quickly provide the right recommendations? How can they rate and review those recommendations? How can the system get smarter about those recommendations? That is absolutely where we need to go. I know as a company at Renaissance, we are obsessing on the teacher's time and on the next steps of recommendations to make immediate actions. And I'd say the other thing that's, I think, moving, and especially for companies like PowerSchool and ours, we're building MTSS systems so that we can build these warning signs, we can help these interventions happen. And what we've seen about the realities of students in our classrooms, we need to show teachers not just academic performance, we need to show behavior, we need to show attendance, we need to show information in one place that makes sense, and progress monitor not the students but the actual interventions themselves, so that we're monitoring these interventions in a way that we can take action and redirect. And I think that's really, really needed in our space today, and hopefully I think there's some real good progression there.
Yeah, I think if you think about anytime there is one of those hard things is, Barton, you were just talking about how long it can take to see the ramifications of those, right? So you have to have that data in place early on to be able to see that long-term impact on that student portfolio. And I think, Todd, you mentioned this, and Barton, I want to turn back to you for a question, which is, Todd, you mentioned one of the challenges, and this is about data interoperability and AI, and the interoperability part, like we've already said, like inside our own companies, that can be a challenge, let alone into the actual institutions that we serve, having them have to deal with the data interoperability challenge of all the different tool sets that they need to fulfill their services. Barton, I'm curious just if you have you have the unique perspective on this particular panel of you have to procure things from all of these peoples. What could we be doing better? What could we do better to make your job as an administrator easier in terms of data interoperability?
Well, if you're a school that's using multiple edtech companies, having some standard definition of what the different fields are that you're looking at, as well as just every company having a basic prescription of kind of like, if we do X, there's a Y% of Z outcome. Surprisingly, there's a lot of ed tech companies I've worked with that can't answer that question, or they don't have a clear definition of engagement. Is it just having the screen open, or is it clicking every once in a while, or do students need to complete a certain number of assignments? Maybe they haven't done those internal studies themselves, and I'm surprised that more administrators and school officials are not asking for those sorts of things before making purchases. But yeah, I think that's probably step one, is getting a clear definition, a common glossary across the different platforms that everyone can agree to.
Yeah. I'm just going to jump in here. Having spent some time with Barton working on a product called Clever Goals that didn't ever quite get off the ground, and sitting in many open standards committees where we've tried to sit in a room and define all the different data elements that ever could possibly exist and formats and schemas for all of them. I've actually come to the point to the realization that that's never going to happen. Like, if you go and look at the air show or here, like the number of companies is exploding, and the types of data we care about is changing so quickly. Like, we will not be able to standardize. Like, it's not going to happen. And that's where I get really excited about AI, is maybe we don't need to. Like, maybe we don't need to get everybody to follow the exact same dictionary definition. That may never happen, but maybe AI can help us take lots of different messy data sets and make sense of them and integrate them together. And so I absolutely agree with you, Barton. That needs to happen. But if we wait for all of the vendors to hold arms and agree that this is exactly how we're going to report data, we'll be waiting too long.
Well, I also think that, as administrators and district officials, we need to be placing more demands on the companies to have this. I've been shocked when I look at even the Chicago Public Schools, how much money individual schools are spending on ed tech when their teachers are not even coming close to the prescribed level of usage in order to get the results that they're promising. It's shocking. And so we need to, as administrators, to be demanding this kind of information more also.
Yeah, and I think, Dan, I tend to agree with you that open standards does become a never-ending hole that you just keep digging. But I think one of the interesting points there is, I do think it can be incumbent upon the ed tech platforms to give their own dictionary. This is what we mean when we use these terms and these fields, and so that there is a little bit more, because then you can point an AI at it and say, okay, give me a report about this, and it'll have that data dictionary almost to work off of. So I think you can potentially solve for yourself to make it easier to use your platform and the data sets that it generates. Go ahead, Lynzi.
The other thing, though, so I've been in this, 15 years, and I feel like there have been cycles where vendors would be like, oh no, you can't have your data. Like, they won't even let the school district have the access they want to their own data about their students and schools. And then there were periods where people were very, it became an expectation. And I feel like recently it's gone back a little bit. So also, I think school folks out there, like demanding your vendors to make sure you have the access you need to your data, so that so that you can do what you need to it as well, I think is important. My school system hat on.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that, because I do think there is something to be said for it. Public sector entities in general are bad sometimes at putting in their procurement that, oh, by the way, that data, I want that, right? That's something I'd like to have access. I don't know if I'll do anything with it, but I want to have the option, right? And so I think there is something to make sure that gets into the procurement itself to say, you know, if you're going to respond to this RFP, by the way, I own this. If you want to provide insight on it, that's fantastic, but that's layering on. Let's go into a little bit of just AI in general, and what do you see, you know, with all the announcements here, there, and everywhere right now around artificial intelligence? How do you see that layering on top of these data sets that your companies have, that the school districts have? How do we see, you know, if you were to do your best to project a year to 2 years into the future? I remember used to try to get 3 years, but let's not even attempt it. If you're trying to project into that, what do you think's going to be possible? What do you see out of these large models potentially impacting how data can be used for schools?
I know, well, I'll speak for Renaissance and where we think the opportunity is. And we've been doing machine learning for 26 years, 24 years. We've been doing AI for a very long time. We predict state tests. We predict the ACT scores from the time you take an assessment. We've been doing modeling on this for decades. So we've had a learning sciences team and that. So I don't mean that as any flex on this. This is not the point. It's just that the difference now with the large language models, we are able to connect this point about a teacher simply asking a question, and this is what we're experimenting with right now, and with all the content you have in your entire ecosystem of this universe, you've got the right-hand side, if you will, of a spine of instructional standards that are connected to every single state and every single textbook and how that aligns. On the right side, you got all this content, all this meta-content data. On the left side, you got all this student data. So the magic and the opportunity and the connection there, I think, is pretty incredible when you think about student performance. In fourth grade, there are 8 grade levels worth of student performance in an average fourth grade classroom. There's a lot of differences in these classrooms and the challenge. So how do we really provide the right recommendation that's built from good content mapping metadata as well as good student information? It's one thing to build federated searches and interesting searches, no offense to Google, but obviously you guys are doing great stuff in this space. But how do you connect the actual learner outcomes and the learner connection to the type of learner, the type of situation? And as you get more data about this information, and obviously anonymized, obviously safe and secured, and obviously connected to performance, there's a really rich understanding and information that's going to come about. And it's not just, hey, cool, I can build you a cool template, or I can search your handbook and find you something. That's the basics. Like, the next phase to me is about creating that motivational learning path that students actually connect based on what the models of their performance at a similar point and the content that maps to the right standards and skills.
Todd, I just want to jump in really quickly. I talked to a startup today that basically, they understand that same model, the spine of the standards, the student data on one side and the content on the other, except their perspective is we don't even need the content. We're just going to create that all on the fly, every day, individualized for every student using generative AI. So that was a little bit of a mind-blowing moment for me. Who knows if we'll be able to get there or not.
Yeah, I agree. I think the challenge is without some type of grain size of instructional object, of pedagogy and instructional design, I have a harder time with that, Dan. But hey, maybe these will get smarter. But hey.
Yeah, I'm going to double down on what Todd said. I mean, AI is only as good as the data that it has, right? If you're going to do any contextualization or fine-tuning or ground truth, like, it has to be the quality of the data and bringing it together. So doubling down on your interoperability component as well, right? So if you're going to make recommendations for students, so at PowerSchool, our mission statement is like personalized education for every journey, right? And that's a nuanced conversation, right? We've been talking about that for years. But what it really does mean, I think, practically, is in the right times, you can try and personalize the way you're interacting with the student, right? What is their actual reading level that not their grade level, their reading level, right? So I can communicate with them at the right reading level, right? Or I know what their recent assessment scores were, we're in a different subject, but I know what their interests are maybe, right? And I'm gonna augment some content that already exists, use some of that generative AI, but then make it more engaging for the student, right? To actually meet them where they are, create better engagement, create content that is more aligned with their interests, like student voice and choice, right? We keep talking about that, but I don't feel like we've implemented it yet. I think that's where we could really take this in the next few years.
Yeah, who knows what the future is going to hold? I'm hopeful that AI may be able to help us to understand aspects of schooling that are important to us, but that we don't measure. And so they've not been at the front and center for a long time. We've seen at Chavez, I do a way of this little fake lottery with students so that I can understand middle school social connections. And what I've seen is the stronger social connections at our school, the greater their attendance, the higher their GPA, and the higher their test scores. There's a very strong correlation there. And so I'd be excited to see how AI can start helping us measure some other aspects of school that are important, but that we might not be currently measuring.
I think I'm excited about that company I'm advising, Dewey, that has a text-based interface for people to, and they actually work with companies to add an AI, equivalent of I have a data coach, because I saw so many educators and leaders who were not comfortable with data. They would look at a chart and they may not understand it, or they just have bad experiences with it. And so to have someone that feels safe, an AI that feels safe, that you can ask questions to and get answers to, it feels like more people get through that cycle of see, believe, understand, act.
Yeah, I think, obviously working at Google, I can do nothing but hype AI. It's in my mandate. But I do think there's something really fascinating and interesting about the way these new models are working. And Dan, it'll be interesting to see whether or not they can generate fully. But I do think what they can do, and what we're seeing in some of the most recent developments in AI, is they've got these huge, what's referred to as context windows. And what you should take from that is, you could take an entire style guide or textbook and say, now, I don't even have to give you anything in terms of what quizzes and things like that have pre-existed, but here's all the content, right? And I want you, and then you take and add to that all that context of, here's this learner. Here's what we know about this learner and what they've been through. You put those two things together and you say, now generate me, this week's plan for that particular student. And I do think that is not science fiction at this point. I think that is actually quite close to reality, something that you can operate against. And I do find that that's an exciting kind of, that aspect we in this space have talked about personalization for a long time. And to really start to see that happen is something that I'm very excited about.
And Chris, on that point, I think that the interesting thing will be, what can we do with the teacher in the middle of that? Because I think often those sci-fi models are looked at as, I'm just going to throw my headphones on, I'm going to go self-learn, and I'm just going to be by myself and learn. Well, learning is social, and learning, one of the most significant points of data that we know from years and years and years is a good teacher in a classroom trumps all good content, trumps all that aspect. So how does a teacher and that relationship and that connection with a personalized teaching and learning plan, I think, would be a really interesting augmentation to that, not just the student personalization, because I think.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we only have about a minute left. Any other last thoughts about what we've talked about so far? Any points that we didn't quite make as well as we should have? I didn't make as well as I should have. I should phrase that differently. Well, fantastic.
You didn't score a goal on yourself, for sure.
Please join me in thanking our panelists for this wonderful conversation.